as we kick it to the next fight on the card, guys, Charalampos Grigoriou is the one who's doing battle this weekend. And like I said, he's coming off that loss in his UFC debut to my boy, Charalampos. Prior to that, he was a underdog on the Contender Series, and he knocked out Cam Smotherman in the very first round. I think Cam Smotherman has been on a little bit of a run lately, if I remember correctly as well. Yeah, since that fight, 3-fight win streak for Cam Smotherman outside of the UFC. So obviously, Charalampos Grigoriou has some talent. However, we have to be clear about the fact he's got some downsides as well. He's got some things he needs to work on. You look at the fact that, he lost unanimous decisions to Sodiq Ismailov, an 0-3 fighter back in 2017. I mean, that's a terrible look. Sodiq Ismailov ended his career 3-4 as a professional MMA fighter. So, I mean, obviously he caught him when the guy started to go on a run, but I don't think that's a great loss. It's early in his career though. So you wipe that one away, say, hey, clean slate, goes out there and fights Josh Smith, a solid enough guy from the ATT scene, regional scene type guy, 12-10 as a professional at this stage of the game. Back when he was 8-6, he was able to defeat Charalampos Grigoriou. Then Christian Rodriguez was able to stop him with strikes in the third round. He slowed down tremendously over the course of that fight. He did get tired, and that's exactly what we saw last time against Chad and Hellinger, right? The cardio wasn't there. The boxing fell apart over time. His ability to take damage kind of fell apart a little bit over time. I thought Chad and Hellinger was going to stop that fight on several occasions. So you just look, and Charalampos is clearly a tough guy. He's willing to stay in the pocket and take some shots, but he slows down over the course of his fights, no doubt about it in my view, and he starts very hot. So when you start hot, you kind of go out there, you throw a lot of strikes early, you try and bring power, and put people away. And that it's a very boom and bust style, right? Then you look at his opponent here, Toshiomi Kazama, and Charalampos actually might be well equipped to beat this guy, right? Just because you look at the last few fights from Toshiomi Kazama, and I have to admit, I've been thoroughly disappointed. Rinya Nakamura has been nothing but a wet blanket in the UFC so far, right? And I say that with due respect. He's very athletic. He's got clear skill. He's got a great wrestling pedigree, much better than mine. Like, there's nothing I would say negative about him, except that his fights have been boring as sin, right? He just goes out there and holds people, throws them into the ground, and, he does a couple cool transitions. Like I said, credit where it's due. He's a fun athlete, but just the style of fighting itself is just like not letting something happen, right? And then you look at this guy, Kazama, he gets absolutely flatlined with no defense, just like hanging his shin out there in the first round. And then you look at the Garrett Armfield fight, and it was a very similar result and made it seem like, man, Garrett Armfield's really starting to put it all together. He's really starting to find his hands, right? And then Garrett Armfield goes out there against Brady Heastand and kind of laid an egg and showed himself to have the same problems he had, pre-UFC a little bit. So I think that when you look at where Toshiomi Kazama is at, he's in a big prove-it spot. He hasn't won a meaningful fight, right? Like, he won a fight on road to UFC over a guy with a 27-11 record, and that looks fine on paper, but ultimately the road to the UFC guys just have not been fully integrated to the UFC level of competition yet, right? Then you look, he had been knocked out prior to that via flying knee in the in the second round by a 2-2 fighter. So this guy in his last 3 fights has been knocked out 3 times, and not against very high level opposition overall, against pretty green fighters. And Charalampos Grigoriou is going to try and bring, power, precision, throw hands. And I just think that last time out, they gave him Chad and Hellinger, and this is my sincere opinion, and you guys can agree or disagree with me, but I believe the UFC wanted Charalampos to do well. So they give him an old Canadian guy that they're not super familiar with, that they're like, yeah, we owe a fight to this guy. And, he's coming off a loss, I think, if my memory serves. So my boy Chad and Hellinger coming into that fight was actually off 2 straight losses, right? He lost to Haile Alatang and he lost to Jose Johnson. So coming off of 2 straight losses, they're like, this guy, Chad and Hellinger, is washed. He's old. This is the UFC's perspective, right? They're like, this guy stinks. We'll give Charalampos this guy. And Charalampos goes out there and had classic UFC jitters. He went out there throwing big early. Chad and Hellinger is not afraid of a firefight. Haile Alatang literally put his nose on the other side of his face. Chad and Hellinger stuck around for 15 minutes. So you just look at what we've seen from a guy like Chad Hellinger, he's just shown way more durability, way more willingness to fight than a guy like Kazama, who's just out there, bouncing into range with no defense and getting killed. And I want to shout out my guy Dixon here, who said Liam Kazama is getting yayaed. I have to just say, if you look at Yaya's fight with Peak, he at least showed willingness to like fight on, right? He didn't show any of that same willingness in this fight with Kawe Fernandez. And for me, it was a great shame because the only way to beat Kawe Fernandez is to gas him out a little bit. He's a great one-round fighter, but he's a guy that does not hold up well over time. And so for Yaya to go out there with like a risk-prone strategy, chin up in the air, attempt 0 takedowns, and just get put down with strikes early, was very disappointing to me, right? But for Kazama, I'm not sure how he would get this fight to the ground necessarily. I don't know that his wrestling is all there. I do think that Charalampos is a guy that gasses out, but I'm not sure that this guy can last 7.5 minutes without getting knocked out against a competent opponent. So for me, it's just like, it's tough to get behind somebody like Kazama. Now, the one thing I want to say is, this guy Kazama, right? Because I got to paint, I painted the case now for Grigoriou, who I think is not very good. And who I did tweet after his last fight, with all due respect, put your hand down. Charalampos is out there after he clearly just lost to Chad Hellinger. Chad Hellinger just beat his ass. Like, that's just the truth of what happened. You guys can go back and watch. Chad Hellinger beat his ass. Then this guy puts his hand up at the end. And listen, I get it. It's your career. You got to try and say you won. But if you have a case, if it's a 50-50 fight, put your hand up and just hope that they give it to you. If you got your ass beat, don't put your hand up, brother. Just keep your hand down and say, hey, well done. You got me on this one. Chad Hellinger whooped his ass. So I think that when you're looking at Charalampos, he had a little bit of that humbling experience. He tasted that humble pie. And I do think he might come out with a little bit more, instead of piss and vinegar, a little bit more shot selection, a little bit more picking his range. And when you look at Kazama, he's training with my guy Tatsuro Taira. Right, he's been getting some work with pound for pound Muay Thai, I believe. Maybe he got some traveling in, but certainly he was doing some work with my guy Taira. I did see on Instagram. And Tatsuro Taira, one of the best prospects in all of Asian MMA. So I think that you look at how Kazama's working. He's surrounding himself with the right people, but in terms of marketability, guys, it's not there. He's not very well known as a product. I believe that the only active Cypriot in the UFC is Charalampos Grigoriou. And I think that the worst Japanese fighter in the UFC right now might be Kazama. So it's a tough spot for him. And I hope that, he can get on track. I do think it's a fight where both guys are a little bit low level, but Charalampos has fought a little bit tougher guys in my view and fared a little bit better as well. So I just don't really see it with Kazama right now.